All right. We'll just wait until everybody gets in. Okay. Let's just go ahead and get started. Hello, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us today. Just some quick nuts and bolts. We are recording this session and we'll be sending out all the slides and all the info that we're going to be sharing. So don't feel like you need to take a lot of notes or anything like that. So what we'll go ahead and do is just go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Nam Nguyen. I'm the Graduate Student Services Coordinator for the college. I'm the one that sends you tons of emails all the time. And we also have Dr. Santos here with us. Dr. Santos, you want to say anything? Is he frozen? Okay.
No, I'm here. I know that other folks have seen me earlier.
Okay. And
for
Dr.
your day.
Santos,
So yeah.
Dr. Santos is may his internet be going in and out a little bit. So if you need to turn off your camera, Dr. Santos, we're good to go. But again, tonight, what we really wanted to get you all together is to talk to you about some of the finishing steps as you're completing your thesis, your capstone project, or your capstone course with Dr. Santos, some of the nuts and bolts. Some of this may be information that you already have heard before, which would be great. That means your chairs have started prepping you, but if not, that's totally fine. Again, that's why we're here. We just want to go ahead and get started, okay? Let's move on. So what we're going to be doing today is talking a little bit about the defense logistics and giving you some tips about how to approach the whole defense. We're going to be talking about the ETD process. ETD stands for Electronic Thesis Dissertation. So for shorthand, we just call it the ETD process. We're going to talk about ScholarWorks, ADA formatting, some of the ETD forms that will be required, as well as the ETD fee. So let's go ahead and get started, and I will hand it over to Dr. Santos.
Oh, I think I lost, there we are, the defense logistics. So forgive me for having my video off. I just want to ensure that people can hear me. But people should already know that we're scheduling defenses basically the last 2 weeks of April. Everyone has their dates. If not, they should have their dates soon from your chair. And those in the capstone course actually have their date already specifically set for April 25th from 5:30 to 7. So that should be there as well. Is there another slide? No. So the defense logistics include Zoom primarily. So we'll do this on Zoom. So please make sure that you're able to access Zoom, have reliable equipment. The way we do this is as if it were a formal presentation like you would do in person. You know, at least in person, people would come in their business attire. For all of us online, we would have to do things according to where it's most applicable, quiet locations, and also whether or not you're able to get people in to view your presentation to become a master's in public health person. One thing I will note, and I don't think there's another slide for this, but overall, these defense logistics, basically the defense takes an hour, a little bit more than an hour. And so what we'll do is we will go through and you present for about 20, 25 minutes. The committee questions you for another 10, 15 minutes. There's questions from the audience for another 10 some odd minutes. And then the committee confers and then we deliver our verdict. And for those who are working with me know that if you're allowed to present, you most likely will either get pass with minor edits or pass with major revisions. Those who wouldn't pass would not be presenting anyway. So that's that.
Dr. Santos, for those who are not working with you, can you talk to them about some tips on approaching their chair to get a gauge on where they're at?
Yeah, so by this point, hopefully everyone has progressed to the point where maybe they are working on their discussion section, right? They're finalizing their analysis, and it's really about writing. And so in this way, you are definitely sort of lockstep with your chair, talking about what their expectations are. And remember, we look at this in terms of how do you meet these competencies that your project is supposed to address. Now, the remaining timeline that you have, remember, these are due May 12th by noon. And so you only have so much time. How you parse out the time over the next basically 4 weeks is what you and the chair decide. What I would do is make sure that your chair or your committee has the final draft copy of your work a week prior to your defense. That way the committee knows what the presentation is going to be about. And that's how we work. And then basically you have another couple of weeks to revise should you need it. But ideally, you've already talked about your chair in terms of when you're going to submit, or excuse me, when you're going to present, and then the timeline about how you need to provide drafts.
Oh, well, it was on the previous slide, but we say practice, practice, practice. And I know those of you that are working with Dr. Santos already are in the habit of doing so. But for those of you who don't have, or have either Dr. Holub or Dr. I or anybody else, you just want to make sure that you have recorded yourself presenting and doing your defense. You can even show it to other people if you need to do like a mock defense. Absolutely, that's totally appropriate in this sense, because the day of, it gets a little nerve-wracking. So you just want to make sure that you can do everything you can to set yourself up for success in that moment.
Thank you. That's a good reminder. I do require my students to practice with me, and I'll just say that if anyone needs that practice and is not able to schedule that with their own chair, I'm happy to hear you out and provide feedback. But again, I'm not your evaluator, so you have to also make sure that you're meeting the expectations of your chair, your committee. But I'm happy to practice with anybody should we need it, work in progress or other times.
One other thing, Dr. Santos, before we move on, could you talk a little bit more about, as you had said, after the students defend and the committee gives a decision, what those decisions could look like and what that means, whether to pass with minimal, the whole thing.
Yeah, so if you look at your competency form, there are 3 outcomes listed at the end. So one is passing with minor revisions, which typically the committee will then just sort of sign off, meaning we'll start routing your electronic signature page. And we would then expect you to take care of those minor revisions. The next outcome is pass with major revisions. And that's something where you probably would be using the next week and a half or so to make corrections, to make additions to your written work. That would probably also need to be shown to your committee before routing those electronic signatures. The last outcome that is stated, but again, as I've indicated, my students don't actually get to present if they're not going to pass. But the last outcome is does not pass, essentially need to try again. And so if that's the case, if you're working with me, we've already discussed options moving forward. And so I suggest if you would really want to get a good beat on where you are, sit down with your chair and say what's going on. And what are the expectations of the project and what you need to do.
We can go into a little bit more detail about this in the event that after you've defended and there's too much work that you need to actually delay your graduation. There's a couple different variations that we can go into. But know that if that's the case, that's totally fine. It happens a lot every semester. So should that be the situation that you find yourself in, please don't beat yourself up about it. There's venues for us to help support you to finish. So whether it be in the summer or the fall, there's definitely different options for you. Okay, let's move on. And we can always go back as well for additional questions should something pop up and you would like to ask Dr. Santos. So again, this is the ETD process, the electronic thesis dissertation process. The university requires, not just the university, but the whole CSU system requires that all graduate programs require their graduates to do some type of culminating experience, whether it be your thesis, your project paper, your capstone course. And that process is overseen and managed by our university library. So Dr. Carmen Mitchell is our scholarly communication library who spearheads this whole process. And every semester there is a absolute deadline that happens. It's a second Thursday of the end of the semester, or the end of the final month of the semester. So for this, it's going to be everything is due to the library and uploaded by May 12th at noon. So that means everything's been approved, all your paperwork has been received, and then all you do is you upload the final document to the library. So what is that repository system? It's called ScholarWorks. If you haven't checked it out already, I would really recommend you to do so. It's kind of neat to see what previous MPH students have done their thesis and capstone works on. But what this means is anytime anybody has a interest in X theme, they can go into ScholarWorks, type it in, and find any type of theses or dissertation or any type of articles that were written from San Marcos faculty, staff, or students into this repository system. So again, everything needs to be converted into a PDF and uploaded to the library by Thursday, May 12th at noon. And I have to reiterate, this is a firm deadline. So it's best to work from that deadline and create a timeline going forward. So everything needs to be submitted by May 12th. Your documents need to be ADA formatted. Your final PDF, whether it be your thesis or your capstone paper, needs to have a signature page as a top cover. What that signature page is, we'll talk about that a little bit later. For group capstones, you only need to upload the document once. So again, ADA formatting, what's that? ADA formatting ensures that your document is accessible for anybody that has visual impairment, so that they can use whatever software it is to read your thesis or your capstone paper. What's great about this is Dr. Mitchell and her team actually has a group that will format your paper for you. It can be a little complicated, especially if you have a lot of charts and data. So we really recommend that you utilize this resource. So I know a lot of you probably aren't completely done writing your thesis or your capstone, but that's okay. You can send whatever draft that you have right now to them, and then they can get the formatting situated for you. And then once you get it back from them, you'll just keep on writing into that formatted document. So one of the deadlines you just need to keep in mind is you need to submit your thesis or your paper to the library by April 25th, and they can go ahead and get that worked out for you. Okay. Now, after your defense, as Dr. Santos had mentioned, there might be some minor changes that need to be done or larger changes. So after you complete those changes, you can send your document back to the library for your final version, and they can go ahead and reconvert that so that it's accessible, as well as merge your top cover and your signature page. And I apologize if you hear whining. That's my dog in the background who's a little needy. So. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's going to be some forms that are required. It's going to be 2 forms. We used to do this as like a wet signature, but now everything is run through Adobe Sign. My team in our office will go ahead and manage that process for you. Again, it's just a part of the NP. So what you'll need to do is actually tell us what needs to be on the form. So for example, the title of your thesis, the date that you defended, and so forth. So in order for us to know, you'll need to submit this information to us on this through this web link. I believe I sent you all a checklist yesterday. So all of us again is on this checklist form for you. So once we go ahead and get all that information, and after you've defended, we'll go ahead and push out these Adobe Sign requests. So let me just jump over that. The 2 forms that you're going to be using is the signature page and your certification form. So what the signature page is, I mentioned it earlier. This is something that is signed by all your committee members once your thesis or your paper has been approved. And that's basically going to be your top sheet for your thesis or your capstone paper, and it signifies that to the university that yes, your thesis or your committee has reviewed your thesis or your paper, they have approved it and they have endorsed it. So this is what your signature page looks like. The other document is your certification form. Now your certification form is essentially your permission, or you're telling the library that yes, we're ready. I approve for you to keep my thesis or my project paper in ScholarWorks. And it also tells us a little bit about, or it lets them know if you choose to embargo your thesis or your paper. I'm going to ask Dr. Santos, can you talk a little bit more about the embargo process?
Yeah. So basically, the embargo process is something that uh, that is used to hold your publication. So once this goes into the library, right, people can search for it and essentially is in one way or another published. If you embargo it, you would give somebody else, like a journal, the ability to publish first. And that's sort of the idea, right? First rights. So for example, a student who graduated last fall has their work embargoed because we're trying to publish this now. We've only embargoed it for a year, but if we can't get it published within the year, then it will just be released to be able to be publicly searched. So that's the idea. And if you and your chair want to embargo it for more than a year, and I think the options of 2 or 3 years, you can do that as well. But that's really the main purpose for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Santos. So that just leads to the question that you really want to connect with your chair and have a conversation. Should your thesis or your project paper be embargoed or not? For most of you all, usually folks don't. But again, as Dr. Santos said, if you're looking at perhaps publishing it with a journal, or maybe it might be attached to an article that your faculty might be writing, you might want to embargo it. But best thing is just to check with your chair. So again, that's what your certification form is telling the library. One, that you're ready to have them hold your thesis electronically, and if you want to embargo it or not. The other item is all students who use ScholarWorks or submit your thesis or your project paper must pay a $25 fee. So what we ask is everybody, despite if you're working in a group or not, everybody has to pay the fee, but you only need to upload your paper once if you're in a group. So again, just to reiterate, if you're in a group, Capstone group with 3 other people, everybody has to pay the fee, but the actual document only has to be submitted once on behalf of the group. Okay. So a couple of to-do items. Again, this is on the checklist that I sent out to you all yesterday. Is you'll need to submit your form information to us. You will want to email the draft of your paper to the library so that they can ADA format it. You want to pay the ETD fee and then send me a copy of that receipt. So when you go online, there'll be a way for you to actually add 2 different email addresses. You can go ahead and either add my email address, or whenever you get a copy of the receipt, just forward that over to me. Okay. After the defense, I'll go ahead and push out the Adobe sign requests. Again, that the request will go for the certification form. You as a student need to sign off first before it can go on to your other committee members. But for the signature page, you will actually just get a copy of it once it's done. So to reiterate, the signature page will get to you once all your committees have signed off. But the certification form, you need to sign off first before it can be routed to the rest of your committee, okay? One other thing about the certification form, again, as I said before, the signature page, you'll be submitting it to the library once you merge it as a top sheet cover of your thesis or your project paper. But the certification form, I will take that certification form once it's been filled, along with your fee receipt, and I will submit that to the library on your behalf. So really the only thing that you're doing is, after your defense, you're going to e-sign your certification form. You're going to send your final draft after the edits are done back to the library so that they can edit it. And then you're going to upload your final document to the library before May 12th. Let's go ahead and take some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Do we have any questions?
I think there are 2 questions in the chat. I see an icon.
Okay, first question is, are we still allowed to walk at graduation if there are still edits we need to make? Is that, I guess I'll just answer it in general. Yeah, you can still walk. And I think the 2 scenarios is, if there are edits you still need to make, meaning will you graduate this spring? If you are graduating this spring, absolutely, you can still walk. If you're pushing to summer, you can still walk as well. That's not an issue at all. But if we're pushing your actual graduation term back to the summer, fall, where you just need to do some administrative stuff on the back end. Did I answer that, Cecilia? Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Second question. For the certification form, it is only the student from the Capstone group that fills it out, because on the screen, it looks like it was just from one student. Does every member of I think the question is, does every member of a group have to fill out a certification form? And yes, they do. Was that your question, Jacqueline?
Yes, thank you. So each student has to fill it out, right, from the team?
Correct, yeah. I would actually recommend too, for those that you are working in a group, you might want to have or designate one person to help shepherd the paperwork and make sure that everybody has submitted it, everyone signed their thing, everybody's paid their fees. It just helps the process go along. But yeah, the certification form, everyone needs to fill it out. But again, I will be submitting that to the library on your behalf once it's been filled out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Alexis is asking, what is a word count max for the abstract of the thesis? And Dr. Santos?
Yeah, I replied that the library typically doesn't tell you. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, that typically you want it to be short. I was going to say 500 or less, but the shorter, the pithier, the better. But the library doesn't have any explicit strictures on that.
What other questions do we have? Let me just go ahead.
What about for the whole paper itself? Is there a requirement that we have to do, like number of pages or anything like that?
I'm happy to answer that question. What I tell all the students I work with closely is that I don't really dictate pages, because the pages should be sufficient to cover the length and breadth of your topic. But as a general rule, right, I've already told students who have a current draft of 12 content pages that they need to bolster it in terms of showcasing more of their public health knowledge in the background, outlining different aspects of the discussion in this way. So I wouldn't hang your hat on, I need to make so many pages, but it's pretty evident when there isn't enough there, and your chair really should help you parse out what's important or what's not. As another example is, the literature review folks, you might have a very robust, thorough, thick background, whereas maybe your other folks who do surveys are focusing on the methodology, the survey itself, explaining the survey results, all of that. So it just sort of depends. Cecilia, that's actually just a library search. So if you go to the library and search theses, you should be able to find those. Or did I misunderstand the question? Or Nam, is there another better response?
No, I'm going to get the link right now, and I'll plop it in there as well.
Okay.
Other questions? I think just one thing I really want to reiterate is for those of you that are working with Dr. Santos, you can ask him right here, but especially for those of you who have a chair that's Dr. Hollow, Dr. I, if you don't know where you stand as of today with what your progress is, how do you feel about finishing? Do they feel that you're going to finish, excuse me, in time? Please connect with them so that they can review your status. It's very, very important, because there are many different things that we can do to help make you successful, whether it be push you back or just get some resources for you to really get things together over the next 4 weeks. It's really, really important. Other tips that Dr. Santos might be able to give?
That I'm offering freely or without questions?
All of it, all of it.
I just think in general at this point, if you're graduating in the spring, that just being very mindful of putting together the written work to be able to base your presentation on. And I see that that's Valencia, you're messaging me. And yes, there are some timeline pieces around, especially in the Capstone course, which is a condensed version of the thesis capstone piece. I've tried to be clear, at least for those in the capstone course, right? You're being asked to invest a large amount of time each week to be able to get this done. And so if there are concerns about how that's progressing, then please make some time with me so we can talk about that. Otherwise, really, at this point, you're sort of not wrapping things up per se, but you're getting there. You're not worried about what you need to do because you've done majority of the project already. This is about the discussion, the formatting, the final write-up. So that would be sort of where I'd expect people to be.
Thanks, Dr. Santos. I'm going to share my screen just one more time. Can you all see this okay, the checklist? So again, this is the checklist that I sent to you all yesterday. Really take some time to review it if you haven't done so already. As I said before, I will be following up with you on due dates and everything. So this won't be the last time you'll hear from me by the time you need to submit, but it really is important that you take a look at this so you know what's due. So again, review the ETD process on the library. Okay, if you do review it, it might tell you to submit forms here, submit forms there. Just as a reminder, we do all the form routing for you. So those are for other programs that don't have a student services dedicated to your program. After this, we're going to want you to go ahead and submit the Adobe Sign information using this link. You're going to want to pay the fee and then send me a copy of the receipt. You're going to want to send your document to the library so that they can make it accessible by April 25th. Now, these due dates are obviously have been pushed out, but I really recommend just do it as soon as possible. Don't even wait, because the longer you push back, the easier it is that you're going to forget to do things, okay? You're going to have your defense state, and then you're going to go ahead and submit your file to ScholarWorks before May 12th. Right. Any other questions? I know some folks are popping in and out. Again, we'll go ahead and I'll send you the link or I'll send you a copy of the slides from tonight. We'll send you a link to the recording if that's helpful for you to use. I'll resend this checklist. But again, it's really important that you just keep in communication with us so that we know where you're at, and let us know if you have any questions along the way. All right. And if you don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and let you go for the evening. Good luck. And we will be in touch with you all soon. Bye, everybody.